In this bag is my dream pedalboard from Schmidt Array, and today in this video we're going to build it step by step. Hopefully this video will serve as a bit of a guide if you ever get the chance to build your dream pedalboard. I've actually built probably hundreds of pedalboards over the years for myself and others, and this board will be the culmination of everything I've learned over all of those builds. Not only that, but this is also going to be my most ambitious board build to date. Even I can admit that this pedalboard is going to be absolutely ridiculous, but the process that we're going to go through today is going to work for any pedalboard build really. No matter what your budget is, no matter what kind of music you play, the steps that we're going to take, you can take them and put them onto your board build yourself. To make that a little bit easier for you guys, we're going to break this build down into chapters for you to follow along with. We're going to discuss the planning stages, power requirements, signal path and gain staging, layout, wiring it all up, cable management, and then the final testing and any potential troubleshooting that might occur. Hopefully there won't be any. One or two caveats just before we do get stuck into this build. Firstly, this pedalboard is going to be ridiculous, and honestly this board would not be possible for myself without the work I do here on YouTube and without the people that I've met along the way. Secondly, the pedalboard, the Schmidt Array pedalboard, and the power supply, which is also the new Schmidt Array power supply, have been provided by Martin and the team at Schmidt Array. Okay, so let's get into the build. However, the first thing we've got to do, the first thing we've got to touch on, no board is fully prepared, no board is fully ready to go unless you have a solid plan. So let's get into the planning stages. Planning is an essential part of building a board, I think, and in some ways you could look at planning a pedalboard as dreaming one up. Pedalboards often start as a dream. For me, dreaming up a pedalboard usually starts with pedal playground, but we're not going to start with pedal playground because me being me, I do things in a weird order. What I think you guys should do is first ask yourself a couple of questions about the upcoming board build. Firstly, what is the board going to be for? What project is it for? What band is it for? Is it going to be used for gigs or full-on touring, or just going to sit in a studio? And if you are going to be taking that pedalboard out the house, how are you going to transport it? Are you going to be transporting the pedalboard yourself? Is it going to be with a crew on a truck? Are you going to be flying with the board? All of these questions are really key for you to answer for yourself, because it dictates how you put the board together. After you've maybe sort of answered that question, ask yourself what sounds are essential for this board. Maybe you have a signature sound. Maybe you have a drive pedal that you are known for. Maybe for the project or the band that you're using, maybe there are one or two songs where you need a very specific delay or modulation. Once you answer those questions, you can start filling in these spots on your pedalboard with specific tones and pedals. For me, if I ask myself those questions, what's the board going to be used for? Well, mainly for recording and studio use, but I'd like to have the opportunity, the possibility of taking it out and gigging it next year. But for now, it's mainly going to be a studio board. So there's one or two things that I'm implementing that mean it's a bit more of an experimental board maybe. I can swap things around a little bit within the pedal chain. Okay, so once you've answered those questions, you've got maybe the beginnings of pedals, what pedals you want to put on the board. You might not even have a pedal board yet. So this is where I would probably switch over to like an online playground. Basically, my favorite is pedalplayground.com, because you can basically input all of the pedals. They're perfectly sized. You can mess around with different layouts, different things like that. And this is what I came up with. I will put a screenshot of my plan up on the video so you can see where I'm heading with this board build. You can see a few of the pedal choices I'm using. So after I made the layout on Pedal Playground, I had my pedals in my mind, what I wanted to use. I made a little wiring diagram on my iPad. And it's really basic, but it's just to get my ideas down a bit more officially, a bit more see how this pedalboard is actually going to work. So this is something that I'm going to be able to refer back to as we build the board, so I know what my signal chain is going to be, I know what pedals need to be connected to what, where my ins and outs are going to be. One thing I should actually say is that this is going to be a completely mono pedalboard. I'm not using effects loops, I'm not using 2 amps. In that sense, it's a very simple setup, but I'm doing almost as much as possible within a mono setup. But with this diagram is really useful because I can see what pedals are going to be before the switcher, what pedals are going to be in the switcher, and then there's also a couple of pedals afterwards as well. I would really recommend doing something like this. You just do it on paper, you don't need to do it on an iPad or anything. The second kind of plan I made was this, and this is basically a list of the pedals that I wanted to use and their power requirements. Now this is really important, not only so you know that you're powering your pedals correctly, but also for safety reasons. You know, you don't want to blow up any pedals. So as you can see, I've got every pedal listed out and their voltage and milliamp draw. One thing you can pretty much guarantee is that if it's an overdrive pedal, a fuzz pedal, chances are it's going to be less than 100 milliamps. So really low current, but most importantly, make sure you're getting your voltages right, your polarity right. So I've got that in my mind. I know what pedals are going on the board. I kind of know the signal chain as well. Like we said, we've got that signal chain diagram going. Next, I need to gather the tools I need to make this board, and that's what we've got in front of me here. So obviously we've got the switcher, we've got the power supply. This is the Schmidt Array power supply. I'll go a bit more deep into that later. We have my pedal patch cable kit, so we've got plenty of cable. We have the cable ends, the jacks, the plugs. I have some Velcro ties, which I often prefer to use to cable ties because they're a little less permanent. What else do we have? Jewel lock, which is my preferred method of securing things to the board, like pedals, like other things. So we've got a big old reel of jewel lock. And then a few tools, scissors for cutting the jewel lock. We have my knife and a Stanley knife for cutting things if we need to. We have my multi-tool Leatherman just in case. We have a straight edge basically for lining up pedals if you want to make it super neat, which I think we'll try and make things as neat as possible. And then another thing, we've got a cleaning cloth just to keep things clean as we're working. A little screwdriver and kind of wire cutter set, which I'll probably use over the stuff provided by Pedal Patch. These are probably a little bit sharper. We need a coffee, we need to keep hydrated because this is going to take a good few hours. I imagine this is going to take me most of the day. If not, I might have to come back to it tomorrow. We need a clean workspace. We need a big workspace. This is my desk. It's probably not quite deep enough, but we're going to try and make it work for the video. And I think we're pretty much ready to move on to the next stage of this board build, which is going to be, we're going to talk a bit more about this power supply. So let's talk power. Before we get on to actually laying the pedals out on the board, let's talk power, because this system here is kind of the reason that this video is happening. This is the the Schmidt Array XPD modular power system, and it is the ultimate power supply. It literally is the ultimate power supply. Schmidt Array, Martin, I met him at Thorpe FX's a couple of months ago. He hand delivered this system to me and the pedal board. We had a chat about it. Firstly, Martin's is a really cool guy, and I kind of got a bit of a behind the scenes look at what it's taken to bring this system to market. This has been 3 years of development, over 3 years of development, because this thing is built from the ground up. And I know a lot of people say built from the ground up, but this is literally reverse engineered, built from the ground up. So firstly, you may notice that we've got a few different units, meaning it is a modular power supply, meaning that you can basically scale it with your rig. If you've got a smaller rig, you probably only need the main brick. But if you've got a massive rig, you might want the full system like this. So this is the main unit. We have 8 outputs on the main unit. You'll notice that we have outputs on the side and the top, meaning that this unit is basically designed to work with tiered systems. Yes, the Schmidt Array boards, but it will work on other boards as well. So you mount it to the back of the board like that, and you've got outputs on the top and the side for pedals underneath and on top of the board. One of the biggest selling points, I think, of the XPD system is how reliable this system is going to be under high temperatures. This thing is tested to work flawlessly at temperatures exceeding, I think, 55 degrees C, which is crazy, crazy hot. So for you guys playing festivals, you know, in hotter countries than the UK, lucky you, starts firstly, but this will be able to power your pedals and keep things cool. It does that by being completely fan cooled inside. We also have vents inside of here. It's made out of aluminium, so it's kind of a bit more temperature regulated that way. It's really well designed in that sense. Every output can also handle 9 volt DC at 500 milliamps, and it will be consistently 500 milliamps. So a lot of other power supplies will say that output is 500 milliamps, but really it's drawing that 500 milliamps from another output. They all kind of are chained together to boost where it needs the power. Whereas this, every single one is 500 milliamps. I guess most importantly though, is that it's super quiet and it helps your pedals sound like they should. It's kind of designed to be the best of the best. They've reverse engineered other units to see what the flaws of those units are, to kind of fix them with this. So if you've ever had a problem with your power supply, or if you're just very serious about your pedal power and you know how important it is, this system should probably be at the top of your list. So what have we got here? Well, this is the main unit, like I said, which has two 24-volt outputs, which you can daisy chain these expander units together. So we have the XPD-E4, which is a 4-output unit, and we have the XPD-E6, which is 6 outputs. And then we also have these two little ones. This one is a 12-volt high current adapter, so this can power things like a quad cortex. I know that a lot of people struggle with the power supply for a quad cortex. They're not super reliable, and when they do break, they're impossible to get hold of. This can easily power a quad cortex along with other pedals if you want to. Also, this one I found is great for powering valve pedals that often require higher current draw and 12 volts. And then this one is a high current adapter for 9-volt pedals. I'll also say that every single one of these logos lights up and it looks so cool when it's all plugged in. So we've covered a little bit about what pedals need what power on my pedal board. We know we're covered with the XPD system because it's super powerful. We've got no real concerns when it comes to power on this board. It's just going to be about getting it all looking neat and tidy and clean. Okay, next up, let's get on to signal chain. Let's start getting some pedals on the desk. Okay, here we go. This is where things start coming together. These are the pedals that are going to be on the board, basically. Really excited about this. These are some of my all-time favorite pedals that have kind of just been, you know, on different boards, but I've never been able to put them together onto one mega board. I'm really excited about this. And the basic signal chain is going to be as follows. We're going to go Focus Fuzz Deluxe from Great Eastern Effects. Then we're going to go into the Dinosaurial Cogmeister. These are going to be my pre-switcher pedals. Then we're going to go into the switcher, the G3 Atom, which I've only plugged it in and tested that it works. I've not really played around with any of the routing options yet. One thing I will say is that this is a B stock and it is almost pristine, apart from it came with just a little scratch on the bottom and a bit of jewel lock. You know, I got a couple £100 off this system because it was B stock, and the face of it is pretty much perfect. So shout out to GigRig, shout out to their B stock. So G3 Atom, I went for the slightly smaller one, as I said, because I didn't think I needed all of those loops. If I went for the bigger one, yes, I probably could have got all of these pedals in the switcher, but then things start to get a little complicated for my simple brain. I still like to hit pedals. I still like to turn pedals on manually. And I think that sort of takes away from that a little bit. What am I going to be using the G3 Atom for? And the answer is mainly my gain staging. Yes, there is going to be one or two other things in there as well, but it's mainly going to allow me to create gain presets basically and switch the order of my gain pedals, make things parallel if I wanted to. It's going to be basically the hub for my gain pedals. In loop 1, we're going to have the Thorpe Effects Hanami. Then we're going to go, loop 2 is going to be the Hotcake, which is going to be my mid-gain overdrive. Then loop 3 is going to be the Germanium preamp, which I really love as like a warm amp-like boost. Loop 4 is going to be the V4 Protein, and that is actually going to sit on top of the board. And then I've just realized I've made a bit of mistake. I've not followed my plan, unfortunately, and I've got 3 pedals and 2 more loops in the switcher. So one of these pedals I'm going to have to sacrifice in the switcher. Now, what we've got the Thorpe Effects, the J, which is the newcomer to this plan, which is why this hasn't worked out, the plug out effects, and the hologram. Now, I sort of wanted these two in the switcher so I can put them after the drive pedals or before the drive pedals, because both of them have effects in that I like to mess around with the order in. For example, the plug out's got an octave. Similarly with the Chroma console, it's got a compressor, which I would often like before my drive pedals. So maybe the J needs to be out of the switcher and be like post those pedals. I think that's what we're going to do. After that, we're going into the Delay Llama Extreme for a bit more of an analog feel, because I feel like we've got quite a few digital things going on here. Out of the Delay Llama into the Mood, and then the final pedal on the board is going to be the JHS 424 gain stage. It's a bit of a Marmite tone. You either love it or you hate it, but I've been really loving recording with it, so I need it on a pedal board. It's going to be really interesting running it dead last as well, because that means all my delays, my reverbs, my modulations are going into that, and that's really cool. I like that as a different texture. If you guys would like me to do a full video on gain staging, that's something I'm interested in doing. So if you'd like to see that, let me know down below and I will work on that. Maybe when this board is complete, because I can show a few different examples with the G3. I think we've got to get the board out. You guys haven't seen the color of the board yet either. Yes, in the thumbnail, it's a certain color. I changed the color. This is going to be a color reveal of the pedal board. Right, let's clear a space. Right, okay, board reveal time. This is, I think, one of the craziest color schemes that Schmidt Array might have done, but there is reason behind the madness, and I think it's turned out really cool. Like I said, it's not the color that's in the thumbnail. I changed it so I could do a proper reveal in the video. Should we have a look? Okay. Oh yeah. Right, let's get it out of the bag. That might be better. Here we go. It's great. This color looks so cool. So we've gone for a light blue and an orange. The reasoning behind that is that, if you guys know me, I'm a big motorsport fan. I love F1, I love endurance racing, I love cars basically. And this design, this color scheme, is basically going for that classic Gulf racing livery, which has been run on like a GT40 race car in Le Mans. It's also been run on Porsches, it's been run on Aston Martins. McLaren and Williams F1 teams have used it in recent years. It's my favourite car colour scheme, and I think there's Schmidt Array pedal boards kind of share a lot of design cues. There's a bit of inspiration, I think, car, automotive design with the Schmidt Array stuff, and I think the colour scheme suits really, really well. So the main board, most of the board is the light blue, but we just have these orange accents on the lid, and I think it looks so, so cool. I think it's going to be a bit Marmite. Not everyone's going to like it, but I like it. So let's open up the board and have a look. Okay, so let's start working on the layout with this. A few things that I'm going to keep in mind are my cable runs, ergonomics in terms of, like I said, heights of pedals and being able to reach pedals, and things like foot access as well. And we're also going to have to think about clearance, because we are putting a few pedals underneath, but we're also mounting the power supply underneath. So we've got to make sure that everything fits and things like that. So let's start putting some pedals on the pedal board. This is what it's all about. So I'm actually not going to start in order of the pedals. I'm going to start kind of from the top and work down, I think, just so I know how things are going to fit. So, and for example, the J is going to go up in the top right, because it's Thorpe pedals are quite tall, so I think having it at the top works best. Then next to it is going to be the Delay Llama, and then Mood, and finally 424. So that's going to be the top row. Now, next row below it is the Focus Fuzz, and I can already see that I'm going to have to put some more dual lock on here. The great thing about dual lock is that you barely need to use any at all. It's super strong stuff. So I'm literally going to cut a couple of strips like that, and then I'm going to cut them in half again. So I've just got 4 little squares of dual lock. I'm going to put one there, there, and there. Okay, there you go, and that means that that pedal is now secure. Next up is going to be the Cogmeister. Now, on the bottom of here, I've actually just got some crappy old Velcro when I'd run out of dual lock, so I'm actually going to take that off and put some new stuff on the bottom of this. Perfect. That's going to go there, and then finally on the top row is going to be the Protein, which I think already has dual lock in the right place. So that's the top shelf, the top tier done. Let's go underneath. Now, I did have to do a bit of extra planning underneath the board because, like I said, we're mounting the power supplies, the expanders into this little bit here. I don't know if you can see on any of the cameras. There's a little recess here where these extra expanders are going to live. So I just need to make sure that we've got the clearance for the pedals underneath, specifically for Hanami, because I know he's a big boy. And if that goes there, is that going to hit? Yes, it is. Hanami is gonna need to go sideways. Hotcake. Are we going to have some clearance issues here? Okay, so I actually think this is going to work. It's going to be tight, but I think it's going to work. Oh, I've messed up there, haven't I? I have messed up there. There's one mistake, so we need to reconsider underneath the board. Maybe the hotcake could go there because it's slightly smaller. The Hanami is the difficult one here because it's kind of too tall to go under the board. Give me clearance. Is that touching? Oh, that's totally fine. Okay, so that's where the Hanami is going to live. That works there, and then this here, like that. Okay. That's fine. The other thing I need to make a note of and not forget to do is the transformer for the power supply needs to fit in here as well. While we're under here, actually, shall we get the power units attached to the board as well? So this one is going to attach to that vent at the back of the board, and these two, like I said, are going to go in this little recess at the top. Now, normally, I think the best way to attach these is to screw it to the top of the pedal board. However, Martin didn't give me the screws, and they're quite specific screws. So he's sending me some. They're not here yet. So for now, I'm just going to attach them with a little bit of dual lock, which will increase the kind of clearance. It will raise them off the back of the board. But for now, a bit of dual lock is going to be more than fine. So firstly, let's put the main unit to the back of the board. I have to say, while we're in here, the build quality of the Schmidt Array stuff is just, I mean, it's so stereotypically German. It's just beautifully made stuff. I mean, Martin is actually British, but everything is made in Germany. It's such high quality stuff. You can see why they've become so, I don't know, so loved by professional players and touring players, because it's just built like nothing else. Okay, there we have it. There is the main unit. Now we need the transformer. I think I'm just going to dual lock it like there. Hold on, I need to think about my clearance again, don't I? If that sits there, where's this going to end up? Okay, that's actually fine. That's not touching the transformer. And that pretty much power sorted. Now what we might do is just put these on the top. Like I said, we're just going to fix them temporarily for now with Velcro or dual lock. Maybe the best idea is actually, could do zip ties and just go round. That's tempting. So I've just attached them up here now with zip ties. Like I said, Martin is sending me some screws, and then they'll be much more securely mounted up there. But temporarily, zip ties are gonna be just fine. Next up, I think we're going to just connect up the little power supply cables as the first cable runs that we're gonna do. So we have these little 3-pin cables. I don't actually know what these cables are called. They screw on both ends, so they're nice and secure. One of them is gonna go into one of the outputs of the main unit, so that's never going anywhere. And then this cable just about reaches to the top up there. And then we have a shorter cable to connect them together. That's actually going to be too tight, isn't it? So I guess another example of where my amazing plan has kind of failed me and how things don't always go to plan. I was thinking originally that I was going to have the main unit and then the 2 expander units up here, which is fine. That would be a really cool system. However, I'm realizing that I actually don't need all of that. These power units are so powerful that I actually probably only need the main unit and the 6 expander unit, which allows me to possibly use the little, the high current 9-volt adapter, so I can make sure that my GigRig has the full 900 milliamps, which I originally was giving it 500. It was working at 500, but if it needs 900, may as well try and give it 900. So we're going to take a little bit of a U-turn here, and I think what I'm going to do is we're not going to need the 4, we're going to go straight into the 6, on the top of the board, and then we're going to have the smaller expander underneath going straight to the GigRig. And then we just need one of the little ones to this little guy. This little cutie patootie. There we have it. That is looking neat and tidy. I'm now also thinking, because we've done that, it gives us a little more clearance for the Thorpe pedal underneath. And is that going to close? There we go. Perfect. So that's actually worked out for the better, I would say. Hey, you know what? That actually looks better. Am I touching? No. Perfect clearance. Perfect. Sick. Okay, time to get the GigRig in there. Now, like I said, I've already got some dual lock on there. I'm going to put one or two more pieces on just so it's a bit more secure. Okie dokie. Here we go. This is it. This is the beginnings of something quite spectacular. Let's put those other pedals back. So top of the board, this is what I'm going to be looking at most of the time. Got most of my kind of dual functionality pedals up here, so things with more than one foot switch, and then underneath everything that is going to be in the looper. So we've got the Hanami Hotcake preamp, plug out effects. This is looking good. So now I've got the layout sorted. I think we're gonna move on to wiring this thing up. So I'm gonna clear up the desk, reset, have a bit of a tidy, and then we'll get on to cabling. Okay, let's get on to wiring this thing up. And now, when it comes to doing power first or audio cables first, for me it doesn't really matter as long as you keep one or two things in mind when you're doing both. Firstly, I like to keep my cable runs as short as possible. Now, there are one or two situations where it's unavoidable that you're going to have a bit of a long cable run, but just keeping that to a minimum will keep your signal a little bit clearer, a little bit better. The other thing to consider is that there is a small possibility that you will increase the noise of your pedal board, like you'll increase general noise if you run your audio and power cables together, or if you have loads of different crossovers between those points. So again, it's inevitable that you're going to have crossovers, you're going to run cables together. Just keeping that to a minimum will minimize any potential issues that you might have. Now, I'm going to do power first, I think, with this board, because we have loads of different lengths of power cables that will help keep some of those cable runs as short as possible. So what should we do first? Let's wire up the bottom of the board first, because we know that we're mainly going to be using the main unit and the expander. Maybe we'll start with the expander unit. What sort of cable run are we going to need for that? Short as possible. Nice, clean. So I'm just going to keep going with this. One thing I'm just double checking as I go is that on the main unit, at least nearly every output can be 12 volt, 9 volt or 18 volt. I'm just double checking as I go, as I plug things in, that everything is 9 volt, because I don't want to blow up any pedals. That would not be a happy ending to this video. Okay, so easy as that. That is every pedal underneath the board plugged in, wired in. So let's close the lid. See what we're dealing with. You could probably see from the top-down camera that it's specifically designed to give us access to some of the ports out the top of the unit, which is just so clever. It's so good how they did that. So what I'm going to do, plug in a few more just for this top row, try and figure out the best orientation for them. We need to check that they fit, obviously, not only when the board is closed, but when the board's open. We don't want anything to pop out once you open the lid. Okay, so that is the board fully wired up with power. Because of the amount of different lengths that Martin gives you, that Schmidt Array give you with the power supply, means that it's super neat under here already. I've not had to really do much in the way of cable management. Things can start looking like a bit of a dog's dinner once we start doing audio, but we have a few tricks up our sleeve that we can do to help make things a little bit more neater once we get to the audio land. Audio is going to be the most time consuming, so I might need a lunch break and another coffee to get me through audio. Right, okay, truth be told, it is a couple of days later. The last clip that you would have seen was filmed on Friday. It's now Sunday. That's just kind of how life works. I've got a baby and a wife, and I realised that I'd spent hours already on this board, locked in this room, playing with essentially Velcro and cable ties. So took a break, which is actually, I think, is a good thing. On almost any project you undertake, especially pedal boards, if you haven't got a deadline or, you know, a reason to get that board done there and then, why not take a break? Chances are you'll come back to it with a fresh mind, maybe new ideas, maybe just a new way of doing something. For me, I haven't touched the board since Friday. The only thing I have done is I've put in just all the jack plugs in every single socket that I'm going to need, mainly just to check that I have enough. Also just for clearance purposes, make sure everything's going to fit and we are all looking totally fine. Next is audio cables, and it is the most time consuming, especially when you're making your own cables. Now, we're not soldering cables. Like I said, we're using these pedal patch. So that's the logo. Pedal patch solderless kits. I've used these for years on every single board build I've done. I kind of made a couple of sets up for a very specific board years ago, and then of course that board has changed and I've just been using the same cables over and over again. I've never had one fail on me. So thank you, Phil, for sending out a big old batch of cable and connector jacks, which I said I've already put in the pedals. I'm trying to maybe visualize how the cables are going to go, kind of create some channels in my mind where things can keep out of the way of the power supply, but also kind of remain relatively neat and tidy. Most of the pedals that are coming from the switcher are right next to it. So these 5 pedals are all going in the switcher, and then it's just the protein up top that is going to be in the switcher. And then the rest of the pedals, that are outside the switcher, they're all in series and they're all next to each other. So the cable runs are going to be super short with this board. I think the longest cable run is going to be from the switcher to the protein, because you've got to consider it's got to kind of not only fit when the board's down, but also not stretch too tight when the lid is lifted up. Shall we get started with making a cable? What I might do is start with the switcher, start making cables from the switcher to the pedals, and then work from there, because I think that's where things are going to get the most messy, and then we can neat things up afterwards. Let's take the Hanami first. Let's do the Hanami first. So I'll take out 1 or 2 of those because that's where it's going from the switcher. So the pedal patch jacks are really cool. Hopefully you can see this, but you can either have it like a normal right angle jack cable, but they also do have a hole in the top. They have a hole in the top as well, so you can have cables coming out straight out the top. And I think that's what I'm going to do for all the switchers. So the cables are coming straight out the top of the switcher. I think that will be cool. So the process is really simple. In the jack plug, there is a tiny little grub screw in the side. If you unscrew that, the lid of the jack plug comes off, and you're left with kind of 3 main parts: the screw, the jack, and the lid, shall we say. And all you do is you take your cable. I'm not going to cut it yet. I'll tell you why in a sec. So you take your cable. Because I'm going straight out the top of the cable, I'm going to put one end into the lid first. Then I'm going to take my jack and push it in to the core of the cable, pretty much as far as it will go. Now that is a pretty strong connection. If I could pull on that quite hard and that won't come off. Then you put the lid back on, don't drop the screw into your pedal board, and then just screw it all the way in. That is going to go into the return of loop 1. And now we've got to basically take this cable all the way up to the output of the Hanami. I've got 2 options here. I could either follow this channel up but down the side of the hotcake, or I could go down the right of the Hanami. And I'm going to go down the right of the Hanami. Even though it's a slightly longer run, I've got 2 power cables going up here. So like I said earlier, just trying to avoid, running audio alongside power. I've never had too much of a problem with it in the past, but just trying to eliminate any possibility of issues, I think is probably a good idea. And I'm going to try and keep the cable really loose, create a decent amount of slack. I want no tension in these cables whatsoever, because it increases risk of failure, but also if this board changes, I might want to reuse the cables. I think that looks okay. So I'll just pinch that off where I think that's going to be. Give yourself an extra inch, maybe I would say, of cable, because you've got to bear in mind that about just under an inch is going to be inside the jack itself, especially as we're going to make this a right angle cable. So snip the cable there. And the process is pretty much the same for making a right angle cable. Unscrew the little screw, take off the lid, The only difference is we don't have to put the lid on the cable before the jack, because we're going to bend it over. So we pop the cable as far as we can do it, and then you just bend the cable over into that little cutout, like so. Find the cutout on the lid, slot that on, and then screw it. Okay, so there we have our first cable. We've got a straight end on one and a right angle to the other, and that is going to go return of the G3 up there to the output of the Hanami. And that cable is pretty much perfect, I would say. It could be a little shorter, maybe. We'll bear that in mind for the next one, but like I said, we're trying to alleviate any pressure, tension in these cables, give them as much breathing room as I can. Rinse and repeat. Let's keep going. We're going to do the send for the Hanami now. You can start to see that this is quite a time-consuming process, so you really need to focus, put a podcast on, put a video on, get a coffee, and kind of hunker down and get into the flow of it. And I've just dropped that tiny little screw. Now this is where I need my signal chain diagram. I need to remember what comes next, what's in loop 2 of the G3. Yeah, hotcake next. Now this is going to be one of the shortest cable runs on the whole board, but the process is the same. And just think about where the cables are going to end up. And, you know, again, I don't want any extra tension on these cables. I don't want the cables to be pulling tight whatsoever. So same process, even for a short or long cable. So just for reference, for time-wise, I've made 4 cables now. 4 cables with obviously 8 connectors, and it's taken 15 minutes. So we've only connected 2 pedals. You can start to see how long this process really takes. So take your time and everything will be just fine. Okay, so the next loop, the next cable run is from the G3 to the protein on top. And what's the play here? How am I going to figure this out? So it needs to have enough slack in it to not be tight when I lift the lid up. And it needs to kind of, I don't want to just have a straight line to there, if you know what I mean, but it also needs to be not as long that it gets untidy when it's closed or gets in the way. I don't want it to get trapped, the cable run to get trapped in any of these hinges. So I'm thinking the play is to follow this channel that's creating between the Benson and the hotcake up here, and then maybe start to kind of go like that. Thought I'd check in with you guys. Baby sleeping next door, so hush tones from now on, but we're at a point now where all 6 loops of the G3 Atom are now wired up. I'm really happy with how it's looking. That's 6 loops, which means 12 cables, which means 24 connectors. And I think it's taken me just under an hour, maybe 55 minutes. And like I said, I'm really happy with how it's going. We've got a few clear channels of cabling that's starting to occur, which I think is going to really help later on when we come to do a bit of cable management. Next up is the rest of the cabling, and it's all really simple series, in one pedal, out the other, basically. But one cool thing that I've got on this Schmidt Array is their Schmidt Array. Mine's gone blank. Patch bay. So we've got 6 ins and outs that link directly to the output of the outside of the pedal board. Because this is a really simple, even though it looks complicated, this is a simple pedal board. We're not using effects loops. We're not using 4 cable method. I'm just actually using 2 of the ins and outs of the patch bay. I did think about setting up like an audition slot, like an auxiliary slot where I could wire in like a fuzz pedal or a wah pedal or something I'm trying out. And that might be something I do at a later stage, but for now, just a simple 1 in, 1 out. So the first cable we're going to go out of the patch bay straight into the fuzz pedal on the top, the Focus Fuzz Deluxe, and then it's easy running from there. So there you go, my first mistake so far. I've wired this patch cable here, I've made it and everything, and it's too short for when the lid's up. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to do that one again. Hopefully this will be useful somewhere else on the board, but, oopsie daisy. I'll have to figure out how to fix that. Okay, hopefully the last snip of the build. We're just about to do the last joint, out to the output of the patch bay, and then we are done. Happy with the cable runs, I think. We are obviously going to do a little bit of cable management, which we'll get to in a second. I actually managed to not waste any cable with that little mistake I did. The cable I made was too short for the job I needed, but if I cut it in half, it was just about the right size to do some of these smaller connections up top. So no waste, that's an absolute bonus. So the next two steps with this build are cable management and then final testing and troubleshooting. And that was the order I was going to do it in, but actually it's probably best if we make sure everything works before we start to hunker some of these cables down and make things nice and neat. So I think we're going to get some power to the board, make sure everything's working, maybe get a quick signal, just a real quick signal, just to make sure that we are passing signal and all of these cables are working as they should. Then we'll move on to some cable management. Let's do this. Let's plug this board in. So I've got a little power cable here, moment of truth. Okay, we have some lights. We have some lights. Good start. Okay, so we can already see the J's on. Focus fuzz is on. Dinosaur Cogmeister is on. Protein is on. Mood is on. 424 is on. Chroma console is on. G3 is obviously on. Let's take a look under the board. You can see these units lit up, the Schmidt Array stuff lit up nicely. Is that coming through? They look so cool. I'll get some close-ups when the board is neat and tidy, but having these glow from underneath the board, I think it's going to be really cool on like dark stages and stuff. Hanami is on. Hotcake is on. Preamp is on. PX1 is on. We have power to everything. Okay, that's great. I had no doubt that this power supply would work. The only kind of possible point of failure was my own wiring, my own kind of foolishness and mistakes. So I'm happy that everything has at least power. Maybe now we need to just check we're getting signal through the pedal board. So this isn't going to be about getting tones. I'm not going to mic up the cab or anything. I'm just going to plug in a cable, see if we're going to get some sound through the board, make sure all of these loops are working, and we should be happy as Larry. I guess I haven't mentioned at this point either, some of you might be asking, screaming at the screen, where's your tuner? Where's the tuner on your pedal board? I'm actually going to be using the tuner in the G3 Atom. I'm going to set aside one of these foot switches to mute the signal, and a little tuner comes up on the screen. Okay, good start. With nothing engaged, we have signal through the pedal board. And let's just go through the signal chain, check everything's working. Fuzz works. Cogmeister works. Okay, and now we're on to the stuff in the G3. So I haven't played with the G3 yet, so I'm not sure how this works properly. So let's just go for loop 1, which is the Hanami. So we've already got an issue. Loop 1 doesn't work. Loop 2, please. Okay, Hotcake works. Germanium preamp doesn't work. Okay, so we have got some problems here. Loop 4. Oh dear. Okay, loop 5. Loop 5, plug out effects works. Please, loop 6, Chroma console. Chroma console works. Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag there. We have a few loops not working. Let's just check through the rest of the pedals. Delay works. Mood works. 44 works. Hopefully this is an easy fix. It might be as simple as I've just got the cables the wrong way around. Send of loop 1 is going to the input. Okay, and finally, loop 4 is not working, which is the protein up top. So that's the send, that should be send. Okay, so I've not made a mistake in terms of the sends and returns, so it's obviously an issue with the cabling, unfortunately. So maybe the best point of call is to redo those. Let me put the guitar down, have a sip of coffee, and think about my next steps. This is why you do a test and you check your cables before you do your cable management. So let's start with Hanami loop 1. Maybe what I could do is just plug this cable into the amp and see if we have any signal. That might be a way to do it. Okay, so we know this cable is dud. And it won't be a fault of the cable, it will be what I've done to put it together. Maybe just not push the core in far enough to the jack. Try this one. Okay, that's good to know. So this cable is okay. Okay, we know the send for the preamp works. Does the return? No, it does not. So not an ideal situation to be in, but we just got to go through it methodically. And I'm just going to see if I can see any obvious signs of why the cable hasn't quite worked. Now there's a possibility with that end that there's like a little pin inside of the jack that is supposed to pierce the copper core of the cable. And just from looking at this, no, it has pierced the core. So I'm not sure what's gone on there. Let's just redo it, push it in as far as we can. Again, I don't think this is a fault of the cable necessarily. It's just me probably not doing as good a job on those couple of cables, but this is why we test things. Right, let's have a look at this one. Yeah, no, I'm actually going to snip a bit off this one because it does potentially look like core had split a little bit or something. Just didn't look quite as clean as the other end. Okay, so that's one cable redone. Let's test it. Okay, on paper that cable works, so it was that straight end that just wasn't quite right, I think. So let's plug that back in. Let's just test that loop just to be 100% sure. No, not working. Ah, I can see. I hadn't pushed the jacket all the way. Oh my goodness. It works now. Cool. You know when it rains, it pours? It's one of those moments. But you just, I'm almost glad that a couple of things have gone wrong because it shows you, how a process of how to fix an issue if you ever come across one. Just take a methodical approach. Maybe take a step back as well. Like I said already in this video, there is a benefit to just stepping away from the project, taking a breather, having a coffee, and thinking about it methodically, one step at a time. Okay, good news, back in business, cables are now working fine. Interestingly enough, all points of failure with those cables were with the straight end. Now, I don't know why that is. I imagine, honestly, user error. But something to keep an eye out if you are making your own cables. Just really double check the connections are working. Everything's now working as it should, which means it's time for a bit of tidying up, a little bit of cable management, which I've got a bit of a hot take on. Let's do another reset real quick, tidy up, and we'll get everything I need for doing that. Okay, unfortunately, a little confession to make. I just filmed the cable management and outro sections of this video, and the main camera was out of storage on the memory card. Maybe my creator friends out there can sympathise, but it's just so frustrating when that happens, especially when it was all coming together so well. But I thought, I'm not going to redo it. I'll just explain to you what I've done and talk you through it. And I think that will be just as valuable to you guys. So, cable management. I mentioned my hot take, and I do have a hot take. Those perfect, pristine pedal boards that you see on Instagram that are, the cables are in perfect channels, zip tied down, everything's on right angles, everything looks perfect. I'm not a fan of that. I don't actually think in the real world that works very well for 99% of guitarists for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's not very easy to swap and change pedals out. For me particularly, I do like to swap and change pedals. I know that, yes, these are the pedals that I've chosen to go on the board now. It might change in the coming weeks and months because I like to try new flavours. I like to swap and change things out and get different tones depending on what I'm going for. Secondly, and maybe more importantly, is that if you have an issue on your pedal board, say a cable goes down, you basically have to rip apart your whole pedal board just to change one cable. And imagine if that was in the middle of a gig on stage, in the middle of a song, and a cable goes down, your whole pedal board goes down, you've got no signal, and every single cable is zip tied down. That's a nightmare. So yes, having everything zip tied down looks great for Instagram, and maybe it's good if you've got a guitar tech looking after your stuff and keeping everything locked down. Maybe there's benefits there, but for most guitarists, I think it's the wrong way to go. Now, I will say my preferred method these days over cable ties are Velcro ties. They do basically the same job. but they are less permanent, easier to swap and change things if you need to. And you can also anchor them down to the board just the same you can zip ties as well, which I'll show you in a second. In terms of my cable management, things were actually pretty easy because we had a good plan from the get-go. You know, I kept my channels of audio and power cables clear and distinct, and just cable tying them together has just made that a little more distinct even further. So for example, we have a few cables coming from the top deck down to the switcher, and I've managed to group those together with a Velcro tie here and a Velcro tie here. Now the cool thing about Velcro ties is that they're Velcro, so you have a soft side and a hard side, and down here I've used the hard side on the outside, meaning I can basically stick them to the soft Velcro on the pedal board, keeping things neat and tidy and eliminating the need for cable tie anchors. So that's what I've done down here. We've got a channel of audio cables running down in between the hotcake and the Benson. There's also a cable from over here that joins that channel and goes into the switcher. Then we also have another Velcro tie here, just keeping the two cables to the patch bay, mainly actually keeping them together so they stay out the way of the hinge, because I don't want any cables getting caught in the hinges or caught in between the top deck and the main pedal board. A couple of Velcro ties here, again they're stuck down to the Velcro on the bottom of the board. And finally, I Velcroed down some power cables down this side, down in between the Hanami and the hotcake, just to keep them neat and tidy and separate away from the power cables. And that's kind of it. That's kind of all the cable management that I needed, and because I had a solid plan from the get-go and I managed to keep things neat and tidy as I went on. Yes, this doesn't look as good as one of those pro pedal boards that you see on Instagram, but for me this is more efficient, and I'm going for efficiency over looks, and that's exactly it. It doesn't need to be pretty, it needs to be efficient. And I know myself well enough that some of these pedals will be swapped out at some point, so making that as easy as possible is really important. The last little thing that I needed to do was just give every pedal a bit of a wiggle, just to make sure they are fully stuck down. Same underneath, make sure I give the transformer a wiggle, a little unit there. Everything is super good, and this board is finished. This board has been a labour of love for the last couple of days, but even longer than that, gathering the ingredients over the last few years, and it's the culmination of a lot of work and a culmination of my favourite pedals of all time on a board now, and that's really, really exciting. Massive shout out to Schmidt Array for this pedal board and for the power supply that isn't even breaking a sweat powering all of these pedals. So this video isn't going to be about tones. I'm not going to go through any tones in this video. We've done the line check, we know the cables work, we know the pedals work. I'm going to do a separate video when I go through my presets and my tones here, mainly because, as I've mentioned before, I've never used the G3 yet, so I need to actually spend some time creating my patches, my presets, figuring out how I'm going to use these pedals together in this form at least, especially, you know, some of the gain staging I can do with the switcher. I'm excited to play around with some parallel tones. We'll see if I actually end up using anything like that. So stick around for that video. I'm really excited to plug this in and start playing guitar. That's what this is all about. This gear gets you excited to play the instrument. You know, playing the instrument is more important than the gear, but if the gear helps you get there, then happy days. There we have it. I'm so excited about this pedal board. There we go, what a process. I hope this video was in some way useful for you guys, or if you just enjoyed following along. Let me know how your pedal boards are coming along. Let me know what you would put on your dream pedal board. And also let me know down in the comments what you think of this board, what you think of the colour scheme. I personally still love the colour scheme. What you think of the pedals on here, and how should I be stacking these pedals together. Thank you guys for sticking with the video up until this point. Sorry it's a bit higgledy-piggledy. It's not gone as I hoped it would, but in some ways I'm kind of glad that that's happened. I'm glad we ran into one or two issues that we could fix live in the video. Anyway, thank you guys, please subscribe and all that, and I'll see you in the next video.